Okay, I just want to talk about the Michael Meldish hit. So, well, according to you, Steve Correa Jr., who was the Lucchese underboss,
He wasn't the underboss. He was just the captain of my father's crew. My father got made into his crew.
Uh-huh. Okay, so who ordered this hit?
From what I heard, he had mentioned Dad knows about it. Later on, I found out that Matt, who was the acting boss, ordered it. And this trickled down to him.
Okay, and there were 5 guys that were involved in this hit.
There was Teddy, Chris, my father, me. And those were like the boots on the ground that night. But Steve Jr. is the one who related it to my father and I. And had Steve been an actual leader instead of just his father's son who got made a captain because his daddy was the boss at one point, things would have gone differently.
Okay, and what was the reason why they wanted him dead?
Okay, ultimately, what I was told that day was there's indictments coming down and we don't think he's going to hold up. I knew that was bullshit. That was it. My father had already told me before we went in the parking lot to talk about it. We met at a restaurant and we went outside. He says, just agree to whatever he tells you and do not ask questions. So I went outside and I kept my mouth shut. When we left, I started talking to my father about it. A little more got relayed to me over the weeks, like about a week after that, which it turned out, I heard 2 stories. One of them from Chris Londonio, that there was a $100,000 debt that Mike wasn't paying back. That turned out to be bullshit. The story that I believe was relayed to me later on between what I've heard from my father and other guys in the crew. Mike had done a collection for Maddie. And when you do a street collection, you get to keep 50%. That's how it is in the street. You owe someone $5,000. That guy comes to me. He's not paying me. You go see him. I come see you. I crack you a couple times. You pay me the $5,000. I bring $2,500 back to the other guy. So what was relayed to me through guys, and then again, I'm a nobody, so it might not be true, was that he did the collection and kept, I think, 45,000 or 50,000 of the 100,000. And what they told me was Matt said, no, you don't get to keep that anymore because now I'm the boss. So if I was just a wise guy or a captain, yeah, you get to keep it, but now I'm the boss. You got to do that collection basically for way less. And ultimately, from what I was told, was ultimately Mike told him to go fuck himself. And then he said something even more disrespectful that I don't even want to repeat. It's not a phrase I say. And he said something else to him, and that evidently Maddie had said, you're a dead man to him in front of people. And that basically once the boss tells you you're dead in front of other people, he's got to deliver on that. So that's how that was broken down to me while I was in MDC prison.
Okay, so describe the night when he gets killed.
I was living on Staten Island. I was fresh out of jail. There was an arrangement. The way that it was going to be set up was, I feel the real reason that my father and I were even brought into this was to make him feel safe because, you know, he'd known us for years and he probably figured, oh, I'm safe. It's Frankie and his son. I feel like I was more of there to rock him to sleep than to do anything. So what happened was my father picked me up at a friend's house I was staying with. We drove here to where I am right now. There's a parking garage next door. We went and got we dropped our car off to somebody who brought us an older car with no GPS. And we drove that to the Bronx. And the way it was going to be broken down was supposedly it was set up with Mike that we were going to bring him 100 grams of dope to take to his distribution network, have them test it, see if they could work with it. And then we'd bring kilos if they wanted it, if that work was good enough for him. So that night, all I thought I was doing was going to pick up Mike, drive him downtown to pick up this 100 grams, and then hear from him later on whether he wanted, how much he wanted. Ultimately, when we got there, my father and I got out of the car. We walked down to where Mike's house was. And when I got there, we greeted him, and my father said, "Oh, go back to the car and get the iPad because there's the map is in there where we're going." I knew there was no iPad in the car because we went to trouble not to have a GPS in the car. So I didn't know what was going on, but I wasn't going to argue it. I just went back to the car. So I got in the car, and at that point, now I told you, I had been having problems with my father. We've had some serious issues. I had a couple urns that he basically lied to me about and squashed. And at that point, I didn't know that he was working to get me arrested, but I knew we had some beefs going on before this. So right away, I started to think maybe I was the hit, to be honest with you. Sent me back to a car by myself. I'm unarmed to get an iPad that I know is not there. So I got nervous. I started looking at every mirror, every window, Heart started pounding a little bit. I figured I was going to get shot. And then I saw my father coming back to the car, and he just got in the car with me and said, "It's done." I told him, I said, "What the fuck do you mean it's done?" And he goes like this. That's one of the things my father does all the time. He doesn't want to talk about something. He puts his finger to his lips, and he doesn't want you to talk. He's always afraid of being listened to or something. And we took it home from there. And ultimately, that was the night that Mike got hit. And it turned out that this other guy, we call him Teddy, but his name is Terry Caldwell. So a black guy who was very close friends with Mike for years. Mike was actually driving him to chemotherapy for 2 years straight. And he was the trigger man. He pulled the trigger on Mike. And Chris was the driver, Chris Londonio. And one of the things that was mentioned on the wire when I was talking to my father was the whole reason they have this case is because Chris was so stupid. They killed Mike, and then he called, like literally within 5 minutes of the time of death, he called Maddie for a 2-minute conversation on the phone log. And it was just him saying, "It's done." And so my father told me if Chris didn't call Matt, all basically proud of himself that he got the hit done and dying to tell the boss it's done, it wouldn't have pointed in our direction as much, because at the time they were trying to deflect blame to the Bonanos because Mike had a beef with Mikey Nose Mancuso. And so they were trying to make it look like like he ordered the hit. But instead, Chris made that phone call, and it put heat on the Lucchese's, on us for hitting our own guy.
Okay. And they found the body in Throg's neck in a Lincoln, and it was just a single gunshot wound to the head.
22 to the back of the head, yeah.
Yeah. And, the police were essentially celebrating when they found out the news.
Yeah. And they found him without $1 in his pocket. So obviously, Mike always had a couple thousand on him. So someone went in his pockets. And they were, especially that guy Coffee, said some really horrendous things about Mike on the day he was murdered.